Good morning, good day, everyone. HR Fest Online again, and we have a very illustrious guest today, Paul Estes. Hey, Paul.
Hey, how are you?
I'm fine, thanks, and very, very honored to have you talking to us.
Thanks for having me.
Paul is 20 years veteran of the tech industry, worked for Dell, Amazon, and Microsoft, and then he left to pursue his own interesting, exciting ideas. He's a consultant. He works as an editor-in-chief for the staffing.com, and he's also a podcast host. Did I forget something?
Well, you forgot that I just launched my best-selling book, The Gig Mindset, which I'm sure we'll talk about during the conversation.
But maybe that's the whole topic of our conversation, the gig economy, because you have some absolutely interesting insights on that, and we love that. So let's jump into that. In the last 3 months, the whole world kind of woke up to the gig economy. It's like almost everybody was a little bit forced to try it, or to try certain parts of it. So what do you think? What did the last 3 months teach to those who were new to this whole gig economy?
Yeah, I think the first and most important thing to realize is that this is not remote work. This is working at home during a pandemic. And we'll talk about a lot of things that I think people had the opportunity to learn during this experience and are still going through. But I know a lot of people who are struggling, people who are at home, who may have children, people that are at home taking care of family members, people that have family members that they want to see, but are unable to travel to see. And so I think it's first important to realize with all the talk about remote work, as companies try to figure out, what their operations will look like going forward, that while we are not at the office, many of us, this is working at home during a pandemic. That being said, I think there are a lot of aspects of flexible work and remote work that people are learning. I think that the idea that you have an office that is set up at your home place is one of the things that I've noticed a lot of my friends and colleagues have to try to figure out. They'd go to the office and they didn't have a place that they called, work at home. How to do teleconferences. One of the things I've noticed, especially with my friends and colleagues that work on location, is that for the first couple of months, they went home and kept working the same way. Hour-long meetings remained hour-long meetings. A lot of conversations had to be had. They weren't documenting things. They weren't working asynchronously and using a lot of the tools. And I think that it has taken time for them really to lean in and learn some of the best practices, because working remotely or even working flexibly is not the same as working in location. And if you try to do it, as I've seen, terribly, is it leads to burnout in a pretty fast period of time. And so there's a lot of things that I think people have learned as this transition has happened. And I think a lot of those learnings will become durable. But I think there's a lot that people are going to have to realize as they really embrace the change in the way that they work.
So what is the gig economy? I know it may be such a simple question, but please tell us how you see it. What makes it different from how we've worked in the last few decades?
Yeah, I think to first understand the term of the gig economy, you have to understand that there are two sides. There is the business to consumer side. And so a lot of people are familiar with the Ubers and the Lyfts and the Postmates and whatever you may have in your location. And a lot of those people have been in the front line of this pandemic as essential workers, keeping the economy going and keeping people fed. And as a lot of those companies have gone public, we're starting to see government and regulation try to adapt and learn and figure it out. Look, all of this is new. Technology moves a lot faster than employment law and compliance and a lot of these things. But the good part is, as these companies have gone to the public markets, the conversation is actively happening, and it's going to be a messy process. But I do believe that people are engaged trying to figure it out. And we're talking about a structural change in employment. And so it's not a simple thing that one bill is going to figure out. And it's really at the core of the fact that technology is moving faster than our ability to respond in a number of places. And so that's the business to consumer side and what you're seeing. On the business to business side, we're seeing tons of platforms start to offer the idea that you can have on-demand access to a global population of experts to help your operations evolve. And that's what we call the talent economy. What I have seen time and time again, and it's one of the reasons that I'm passionate about the work that I do, and I advocate for companies starting to understand the possibility of what they can accomplish, is that talent now has a choice. It is going to be now, today, and into the future, that the experts that you want to help your company, no matter if those are customer support experts, whether those are technology experts, whether those are design experts, or a number of different types of human capital, will only be accessed in flexible ways through the talent economy. I think there's this idea that has always been challenging to me, that the people that I needed to accomplish a professional outcome had to exist within a 75-mile radius of wherever a campus might have been, seems strange. And so 5 years ago, I started working with freelancers. It fundamentally changed the way I looked at collaboration. In fact, I just published an article in Fast Company, and I hope you can share it with people, about how embracing remote work and embracing freelancers and going to where the talent is necessary if you believe in diversity. And that's real diversity and inclusion, which I think is a very hot topic globally right now.
Oh, absolutely agree. The reason I think diversion and inclusion is sometimes such a difficult topic to put forward is because the business rationale is sometimes missing. And that's why I like a lot what you say, because diversity should mean, I think, that diversity of talent, and that's very, very, very accurate and very important, and that helps a lot every company business-wise. Actually, sorry, yeah, go ahead.
No, since this is an HR focused conversation, I think that there is often some confusion on what true D&I or true diversity and inclusion programs could look like. I think there is the compliance aspect of it, which I think is important. I'm not minimizing a business trying to protect itself from risk, and also making sure that their hiring practices and their processes are both diverse and inclusive. I think companies need to go and make sure that they're having conversations in an open way, and I think a lot of companies are starting to take that step. I think the step that they have not taken is believing that the talent that they need to bring real and true and enduring diversity into their organizations will force them to embrace remote work. I mean, remember, it wasn't only but 4 months ago we lived in a world where a vast majority of companies would tell you that remote work was not possible. That these knowledge work companies would say, hey, look, if you are not able to come to my office, if you're not able to pick up your family or whatever your circumstance may be, I'm sorry, we just don't have opportunity for you. In the past couple of months, in a lot of ways, we've debunked that. We've kicked down that wall that said location is no longer, or may no longer be a requirement. And so I encourage companies, as they think about various biases, as they talk about diversity and inclusion, to really consider their location bias. To say, hey, look, there's a candidate that I think would be amazing. There's a candidate that I think is diverse and will bring that sort of diversity to our company, but we have to get over the idea that the only way to engage them is to bring them into our location.
Absolutely. And that's why I like a lot that you call your everything you do the talent economy. It's a bit, I know that your book is titled The Gig Economy, but for me, the talent economy is better in describing what actually happens. The gig word has a little connotation that is, a bit like we are rock stars, or whereas talent is actually means that it can be for all kinds of jobs, and it's a big difference.
Yeah, no, it's actually a really good point. The book, I have to do a shameless plug for the book, which was published in July, and it's called Gig Mindset, because the belief that the gig economy is providing a way and a framework to think. And so the book is a lot of people were collaborated in. We have somebody, the Deputy Innovation Officer over at Open Innovation Officer at NASA, a woman from General Electric, and many others whose voices are in there that are talking about how large companies can use a different way of thinking to access amazing talent that is diverse. And when I talk about diversity, it's not only gender, race, religion, but it's thought diversity as well. And I think in my experience, as I wake up every day and engage with freelancers and talent around the world, that's how I'm inspired. I'm inspired by people who bring culture in our conversations that I would have otherwise not had access to. And that is the world that I want to live in. And one of the reasons that I have, moved from the corporate structure and the corporate employment that I enjoyed and benefited from over 20 years into a way where there is no boundary, there is no location bias in how I engage with talent.
And that brings two questions. When we talk about gig economy or talent economy, there are always two questions coming up. One of them is, okay, talent economy, gig economy is very good for the top 5% of all kinds of jobs. But there is a limit in the type of jobs you can kind of use or where you can do like that. What do you think? Is there a limit? And if yes, where is this limit?
I don't see it that way. I do think that people who have expertise will always invest in themselves and invest in learning, or even have opportunity and some privilege, will have access to those jobs. I do believe that a lot of those jobs today are held captive from a location perspective, and that opportunity is just not available to those experts, even around the United States or around the world. I was born in the South, in the US and Louisiana, and I had to pick up and move to Austin, Texas to participate with Dell, be employed by Dell, and then move to Seattle, Washington to work with companies like Amazon and Microsoft. I think that the opportunity for those jobs, for those engagements, to be spread into the communities, whether it's the middle of America or other places around the world, is tremendous, and not only strengthens those communities, but really helps to reskill people around the world. You asked a very specific question. Is it only the best of the best, only the best scientists or AI or the best coders or the best executives? And when I look at the types of jobs that organizations hire for, I look at the work that Amazon's doing in hiring military spouses to do customer support and some other type of knowledge work. I look at many other companies that are bringing in people to do, writers and other types of things. And so I think that there's a very broad swath of knowledge work where you can rethink your operations and really remove location from that equation.
That's awesome. And the question is, what is happening is it's much more than just a new way of working, because previously every employee, it was always a question, who is responsible for the development of the employee? Is it the employee himself, herself, or it's the company? And with the gig economy, it's not a question, is it? The question of who is responsible for the particular person to develop him or herself, it rests with the person, isn't it?
100%. I think one of the things, and I talk about it in my book and the various keynotes that I give, is that I'm a third generation company man. My grandfather benefited from the GI Bill here in the United States and went on to a career in insurance and had a pension. My father, spent 30 years at Royal Dutch Shell and also enjoys a pension. In a lot of ways, the societal contract as I was working changed. And that's just a change. I'm not passing judgment. I understand this. I spend a lot of time, studying the space. And then I went to work at large companies. And I was very thankful to some of the classes that they had and the career ladders and the structure that they tried to provide. But what I found is that every time I would look at that training, it wasn't relevant to me. It was one size fits all, and maybe it was helpful to some people. A lot of the training they provided was in classroom or, hey, watch these 8 or 9 hours of video. And that's not really how I learn. I learn through lab methods and learning by doing and, interacting with others. And so And what I often found also is by the time I finished all of the compliance training, all the training that was required to participate in the organization, I didn't have any bandwidth to go actually, reskill. If I wanted to work in a project on a different team, it really wasn't allowed. They talked about it, but when the rubber hit the road about me going to participate with a, parallel organization, those opportunities didn't exist in a real way. And so, in many ways, I was held captive. Now I'm thankful, but I was captive. They told me how to work. They told me when to work. They told me exactly who I could work with. And if there was any other time I had, they were very restrictive on how I could spend that time from a professional perspective.
I feel like it's a bit like taking really people as adults and not as children, and letting them, be themselves and allocate their time, their location, their knowledge, their everything like they want to do. And that is, for many people, I think that's a very, very interesting and exciting alternative. But what do you think? Is everybody capable to do that? And what kind of future do you see? What is the future of work?
Well, the future of work is a very complicated question. But let me tell you a story around my thoughts around remote work prior to COVID. I remember being in a leadership team meeting, and we were sitting there, and a number of different people, some had medical reasons or family reasons that they wanted more flexibility in the way they work. Some people just said, hey, look, like myself, I find a lot of energy and deep focus time and, being alone. And in a corporate setting, that wasn't possible. There were people around all the time, constant interruptions, the water cooler and stuff. And so for me, it was really challenging to get my best work done. So we're in this staff meeting, and they said, we need a remote work policy. I'm like, I'm not sure I understand. What do you mean remote work policy? They go, well, we should write a bunch of things down and have people sign up on when they want to work remotely and make sure that managers approve it. And there's some technology that we could use. And I got really confused. And so I, raised my hand, and they called on me, and I said, well, I have a policy. And they go, well, what's your policy? I said, well, we hire grown adults who are experts in their field, and we should allow them to get their work done how they need to get their work done. If they're not supporting the outcomes that we want, if they're not supporting the team, that's called performance issues. And we have tons of policies and ways to deal with performance issues. And so I was a bit confused when we wanted to add more policy on top of the way that, hey, we have a mission, we have some work that needs to be done, we've hired the best people, otherwise they wouldn't be here, and we should empower them to do that however they want. But a lot of people wanted to put more structure and more policy in place, which in my view flew in the face of empowering people with flexibility. You also brought up a really good point. Is everybody ready for it? Can everybody work in that environment? I think one of the things, and I wrote a very popular LinkedIn article on this, on the need to reskill. Technology is moving faster than ever before. Companies are changing and restructuring. The idea that you're going to stay in the same job for 30 years doesn't exist. And I think that the worst thing that we can allow to happen is that somebody sits in a job and feels comfortable, and then things change, and now they've got to go out and compete in a world that has passed them by. And so, I think it's more important than ever to have conversations on the need for continuous learning, on the need to be uncomfortable, on the need to push that and learn new ways to work. And I think that in and of itself is a training program. I think that often people look and, hey, I did a learning course. You now have access to all of this learning, but we're going to work in the same way. We're going to have these staff meetings and the next meeting, and whatever the structure is, how you might work, well, that brings comfort to people. When that changes, people aren't prepared for the change. And we know now, as we look across all of the companies as they prepare for 2021 and beyond, things will have changed in a very drastic way for some and a very incremental way for others, but we're not going back to the way it was before. And so I think, really pushing on how you work, pushing on who you bring into the organization and who you work with has never been more important.
So basically what you say is that it's not a question if everybody is capable to do that. The question is those who are not prepared or who start getting used to this whole thing later and later can be at a big disadvantage.
That's exactly right. I mean, one of the reasons that I, in the latter part of my career, struggled is that the way that I wanted to work. I looked at sort of my career over the next 20 years because I'm going to have to show up and be professionally valuable. And I didn't see a path where I was going to be able to attain the skills that I needed in an open sort of way. And I looked at that world. I spent a ton of time talking to people and I said, look, I'm responsible for my career path. And if that career path can be met at a large organization, great. If it can't be met, I have the responsibility to make change. And so when I looked at not only my personal relevancy, but when I look at my two daughters, what served me well when my father was coaching me on my first job, find a reputable company, show up and do good work. The company will take care of you and there'll be a lot of org changes and stuff. That suited me well for a little while. But when I look out into the world in the next 20 years, I need to gain the skills to give them advice. And I didn't feel like I was gaining those skills.
Exactly. And bringing up your daughters, or the daughters, isn't it?
I have two daughters, 5 and 6. Yeah.
I have one as well, 6. So the biggest advantage you can give them probably is not only the factual knowledge, but the idea that they have to constantly work on themselves and constantly be able to adapt and change and be resilient. And that's the biggest preparation need for them probably.
Yeah, I think there's that. And, it's interesting. I'm working with a couple of companies in Africa, and every time I do one of the calls with one of the CEOs, my daughter is there and they spend the first 5 minutes in the call where he shows her where he is located in the world and explains a little bit about what he does. I think it's not only that we have to teach people that you need to be adaptable, that you need to learn, but also that the world is a very large place. When I look at information work, I think there's 3 things that are going to really impact information or knowledge work as we know it, if that's the business that you're going to be in. One is globalization. And we saw it happen to manufacturing, and then we saw it happen with business outsourcing. And now we're going to see it in general knowledge work, not to mention technology, the automation in the RPA that's in its infancy now, but is just around the corner. And then all of the things that you see around AI. And so it's not only important to be adaptable, but it's important. Diversity isn't a nice to have. Diversity is a core thing that needs to be ingrained into your organization as you fight for relevancy.
Absolutely. So I have 2 more questions. Sure. What can somebody do who is currently employed by a big company, is okay with it, does not have the pressure to leave the job, but he or she would like to start preparing for a new life in the gig economy, in the talent economy? What can he or she do?
I think there's 3 things that I did along my journey that I always advise. Number one is, I'm a pretty avid reader. And I think if you look at anyone who is looking, whether they're driving strategy or some of the CEOs that you're impressed with, or anybody looking for change, reaching out and finding those diverse perspectives through books is the easiest, lowest friction way to start learning. And so I went through a journey where I was reading a book a week and really just trying to understand where I wanted to go. What worldview and what life did I want to live? And then how could I make that possible? And so I think it's important, whether it's a book or whether it's articles or whether it's podcast or whatever, there's a lot of content out there that can inspire you and help you along your way. The second is, mentors. Find people that you want to reach out to and have a conversation with them. Learn about their journeys. I spend a lot of time on calls, helping people and listening to them and really helping them think through where they may want to go. It's interesting, if we have a physical pain, we may go to a doctor, right? If we have a mental thing that we want to get through, we may go to a psychologist or a psychiatrist. but yet we spend all of our time at work and we don't seek the help of professional coaches and mentors like we should. And so one of the things that's been really helpful to me have been professional coaches throughout my career that really helped me gain perspective, really helped me work through the issues that are unimportant that I may have blown up to be very important, and then understand the ones that will really help me drive a meaningful change. The third is experiment. You know, it's not binary. You don't have to one day have a full-time job and the next day, you know, be a freelancer or a consultant or, you know, one of those things. Work on side projects and engage with other people to create, whether that's creating content, whether that's advising on something, whether that's finding small companies that you know, if you're senior in your career that you might be able to help, but roll up your sleeves and dig in. Look, you may try 15 different things and 10 don't take. Well, heck, 14 might not take, but that one that does will help really transform the way you look at the future of your career.
I think these 3 points should be basically heard by everyone who is close to this. And one of the books they need to read maybe is your book.
I agree.
The last question is, and what can an HR director do who is responsible for 500, 1,000, 5,000 people, not necessarily the most advanced technological company, you know, a normal company who wants to start moving the organization or allowing some parts of the organizations to open to the gig or talent economy? What are the possible steps?
I think there are a few that are very important. Number one, you have a job to do to ensure that the company the risk is reduced, that the human capital is well taken care of. And that's sort of the run rate. That's what the job is when you sign up for it. And so, you know, keep those operations focused, understand the compliance, the policies, and all of that. The other thing is create a space for experimentation. I think one of the most impressive things that I've seen is that there are a number of organizations, external organizations, that are really trying to create a conversation around progressive HR practices. And so I think every organization may have one of those people that has an idea of how they reach outside the organization or how they might innovate in the way that they attract or attain talent. And I think it's empowering those people and then amplifying what they're learning, not the success, not the cost savings, but what they're learning and the risk that they're taking. Anybody out there who has an idea, anybody out there who wants to make a change is taking a risk. And so find those people, lean in, and figure out how to make their voices be heard.
Actually, you don't know that, but we are also running Fuck Up Nights in Hungary. Fuck Up Nights is a format about failure. And we try to celebrate failure, and it's basically a bit like that. So those people, those companies who can identify and celebrate failure, that leads to success.
Yeah, it's usually pretty hard in the HR organization specifically, because failure may look like hitting the boundaries of a policy, right? Or pushing against something that was a tried and true belief. Remember, 4 months ago, the idea that everyone could work remotely was unheard of. In fact, a lot of companies had policies and compliance rules against it, right? You couldn't bring your computer home 4 months ago. And so, you know, I think there's a lot of things that people can do in this moment to rethink their approach, and not only their approach, but what is your job? You know, what is the value that you provide? And not only that, where do you personally and professionally want to go?
Yeah, basically, what is your purpose? Although these words are overused, but the deep meaning is really important. One last question, if you have still the time.
Sure.
Another big discussion we had on gig economy is that as you did, and I was also working for large multinational corporations, and I am also a bit of a gig worker now. You don't know that, but my other life, I am starting microbreweries, brewing beer, because I love that. And I found out that actually when I left the large corporations, I do work the same time or even more in hours, but what I spend my time on is very much different. And that's what I wanted to ask you is that in a big corporations, people spend a significant amount of their time in intra-company political games, fights, you know. Is it true that some of those who are open to the gig economy are escaping that, or want to spend much more of their time on really fruitful, creative things instead of, you know, these sometimes really stupid political games?
100%. I have two podcasts for anyone who's interested in the answer to that question specifically. One, I interviewed Melissa Morgan, who is an amazing designer, and another gentleman, David Nuff. And both of them will give you perspective. They're at the top of their field. And both of them will give you perspective of how they love the work, how they love the outcomes, how they like the creativity, how they love working and collaborating in teams, but no longer had the energy to spend 30 or 40% of their time in internal meetings or politics. You know, one of the things that I've been able to experience as I not only work for a very large distributed company, but also work as a freelancer is I don't deal with the politics. I don't see the politics. I work on the outcomes. I work in collaborating with the team. And in many ways, especially after 20 years in big technology, it's a very freeing experience. And to your point, I'm working as much, if not more, but I'm working in a very different way.
You know, it's because the boundary of work is a blur. I am so excited to read your book now that you talked so much about that. I want to read it. What is it? Is it going to be work or is it going to be fun? It's going to be both.
Well, look, as you know, work is work. It's given the name work. And are there days that I'd rather be out on my bike or doing? Of course there are. You know, even if you have a passion for a topic, there are days that are frustrating. There are days that are hard. There's days that you are trying to intellectually figure out something. And so just because you have found purpose and just because you have flexibility doesn't mean that work is not work and work is not hard. But when you break all of the structural things that are put against that work, like you have to work from 9 to 5. You have to work in this place. You have to work with these specific people all the time. It really starts to evolve not only the purpose and passion and energy you bring, but also it unlocks amazing outcomes and possibilities.
Yes, although I slightly disagree on, okay, maybe your book, we talk too much about that, but Wired magazine, I love Wired magazine. When I read Wired magazine, what is that?
Which magazine?
You know, Wired from the States. Wired.
Wired?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's basically, for me, I read it when I'm on holiday, but also it gives a lot of energy, a lot of creative thinking, etc., etc. So I think the boundary, in this respect, the boundary is a bit getting blurred.
Agree.
Great. Wow. So many thoughts we need to keep in our minds and explore in the coming months and even years.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for having me. The one thing that I would leave everyone with is these are amazingly challenging times. You know, take time to check in on yourself. Take time to make time for your family. Make time to find that hobby, or if you're in a good place, reach out to other people. You know, even if you're working remotely, or especially when you're working remotely, isolation is a big thing, and mental health is right now more important than ever. So if there's one thing you take from this entire conversation, take care of yourself.
That's a very good message. But I think people will get much, much more from this conversation because you said so many interesting stuff. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
And we are going to keep a look on what you do. And maybe a few years from now, we are happy to invite you back. And if you are anywhere around near Budapest, Hungary, just pop in. We are happy to put you on a stage for a few thousand people.
I look forward to the day that I'm able to jump on a plane.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Have a nice day. Ciao, bye-bye. And thank you for your listeners. Have a great day and digest all these fruitful thoughts.
Take care.
Ciao.